All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm with the Maryland Coastal Bays Program, and Steve Farr over here at the table is with the Coastal Bays Program as well. And Kim Aplenap is also with Coastal Bays Program. She's our bird conservation coordinator. Also over there is Chris Beecraft. Chris is with Underwood and Associates, and they are contracted to do the design build for the project. We're already veering off of our agenda because John, you're supposed to be doing the introductions here. Uh, but anyway, I wanted to just point out John Viola and Rick Farr and Doug Parks, who Doug's been working with us on this project since I guess we can see this a year or two ago, right? Anyway, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. You can switch to the next slide, Steve. On this project. So Jenkins Point, in case you're not familiar with where it is, it's just south of the Route 90 bridge, where the St. Martin dumps into Isle Bay. It is just off the Osprey Point condominiums there. So, and just if you've kayaked or boated out there, you've gone by those little islands. You can hit the next slide. Little bit closer shot. There's the yacht club right there with part of the marina. And what this shot really shows is that over time, what's going on at Jenkins Point itself. And the green line that you see there represents the 1961 shoreline. As you can see, Jenkins Point was a long peninsula. It wasn't a series of islands back in 1961. There was that island offshore a little east, but it was really a long peninsula. And over time, a lot of it has eroded away. You can see that one red line right up there. That represents about 120 feet of erosion in over the last 60 years. So it's gone, about 2 feet per year over time, and in some areas a lot more than that. Some areas a little bit less. But anyway, it's changed quite a bit, and those islands that are out there today are eroding away as well. So that peninsula really represents a barrier to wave energy and storm energy that comes in, particularly on nor'easters, into the marina and the residential developments back there. So we were asked to take a look at this site a couple of years back, and we applied for dollars to do design to do what we call a resiliency project. And these resiliency projects are really what we call nature-based or natural-like resiliency projects, because while we want to focus on restoring the peninsula itself, we want to do it in a way that's also going to provide other benefits like habitat for terrapins, horseshoe crabs, shorebirds, things like that. So we use a lot of natural materials and marsh grasses and things like that to rebuild a structure here that is going to do one thing, which is last over time, and two, to protect the inland areas and the areas, all the infrastructure in there from storm energies. One thing it's really important to understand is that a project like this won't do anything for flooding. Flood waters rise, fall, etc. This isn't going to do much for that. Won't do anything for that. What it will do is protect from wave energy coming in, and that's really the purpose of the project. So anyway, about 6 months ago or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, we put a bid out and for design build for this project, and Underwood and Associates won that bid and have been working on the design since that time. We had a meeting here a few months back, maybe 4 months, but maybe 6 at this point. Anyway, just kind of showing some of the conceptual ideas, got some feedback from some folks, and now we have put together we'll call 30–40% design for this project. So we'll lay that out for you, let you ask some questions, and we're going to have Chris from Underwood and Associates explain kind of the design approach and how this project moves forward, and all the steps that'll take place as we do that. So, Chris, I'm going to have you come up and do that if you would. You can hit the next.
Good evening, everybody. Who was here last time, a few months ago? All right. Who wasn't here last time, a few months ago? Hey, it's like 50-50. Perfect 50-50. So again, I'm Chris Beecraft. I'm with Underwood and Associates. We're an ecosystem design build company based out of Annapolis, Maryland. We do have a shop over here on the Eastern Shore, right in Bishopville. We do all sorts of work related to ecosystems. Now, we oftentimes find ourselves in community meetings like this because a lot of the ecosystem work that we do directly impacts community infrastructure, private infrastructure, state highway infrastructure, things like that. 2024, a lot of government funding agencies are looking to fix problems or help fix problems through what we call nature-based responses. So one issue we have here is we have a marina that's on the wide open bay. It's currently protected in a certain wind direction by Jenkins Point and the adjacent islands. However, with inundation, sea level rise predictions, just wave action generally during larger storm events, those islands, as Kevin showed, are getting smaller, smaller, smaller. One thing we know is that they're not growing. How long it'll take for them to actually be gone, we don't really know. There's data that shows the trajectory, but at some point in time, they will be underwater more than they are above water. And then at some point in time, they'll be totally gone. So our goal in working with the Coastal Bays program and really working across the state with other groups, you guys have a really amazing project. We're excited to work on it, but there are a lot of other projects like these going on around the state. And it's a beautiful thing. It's like I said, it's mirroring this habitat creation project, which we're lacking a lot of in these areas like the coastal bays for shorebirds, for terrapin nesting, with needs for communities. And it's nice because we allow it puts us in these funding pockets that that can make it more palatable for communities like you to provide responses to big storm events to your marina, where otherwise you might have to flip the bill through your marina fund or something like that. So that's why we get excited to work on projects like this. It allows the funding scheme to be opened a little bit. So we have this. We also have the drawing behind me. If anybody likes paper, pen and paper, come on up, take a look at it. And then I'm going to flip over to it in a second. This is similar to what Kevin had showed, but this is it today now very clearly. Obviously, you can see it without the red, but we highlighted it in the red just to see the land mass that's there now. And when we design our projects, we do two things. We sit down, well, three things. One, we want to make sure they're constructible. So what I'm showing you today, and what we're going over today, is based in science. It's also proven in construction. I'm only a few years over 30. Kevin's been doing this for 30. And some of the techniques that we're employing here are the same techniques he used 30 years ago. And we've learned on those, 30 years later. We do 5 or 6 projects like these a year, and they're becoming far more ubiquitous across the state. So I do want to make sure that I say this is not rocket science. This is not something super far-fetched. It's pretty unique, and you still don't see it everywhere, especially because a lot of our shoreline is owned privately in Maryland. But a lot of these state parks, a lot of these community association groups like yours, we're starting to see larger landscape projects like that. That's important. It's constructible, it's fundable, it's buildable, it's permittable also. And two, we look at how do we have a project that's mutually beneficial. So something that's not just coming to armor your marina and protecting your marina from waves. We can do that with an offshore Army Corps style jetty. But for that, you're not going to do much for local water quality, local habitat. How do we spend the same dollar and get both? That's what we provide. And then lastly, is something that, all things all good things come to an end, but nature is inherently regenerative. It grows on itself. Conventional engineering, it falls down over time. Doesn't matter how well built this building is, if left alone, it will ultimately, gravity takes it down. A highly functioning ecosystem grows on itself over time. And we've been able to study these things, learn from them, and build a lot of projects that are successfully regenerative. They're 30 years old and they're stronger than they are the first day that they went in. That's our goal, is that, you know, my kids can come and enjoy this thing, not just us, you all. I don't know if, Steve, can I flip through this thing? I think you know.
Like the pointer works.
I've clicked it like 10 times. All right, so when we met last, we had a concept. And I'm not sure if this is one of the reasons why the Coastal Bays decided to work with us, but our concepts, you're going to see it's not much different. There's some intricacies I'll go over that are different, but our concepts are very vetted. They're very, we call them time to grade. They're realities. So you're going to see that in this drawing that's, depending on how you look at it, 30 to 60% complete. And what it is, it's the goal is to use pretty standard engineering formulas. We call it the Hardaway ratios. It's a gentleman by the name of Scott Hardaway, coastal engineer down at Virginia Institute of Marine Science, has studied these natural shorelines across the Chesapeake and Maryland and Virginia, and figured out this distance ratio of hardened structures that will create a stable bay over time. It's really interesting. If you're bored tonight, go on Google Earth, go to Hawaii, go to Maine. You can find these. Now they range when you're up in Maine or Hawaii or down in Florida. But there are these ranges of bays that are stable over time. They wiggle a lot, but they're stable over time. They're not eroding away like Jenkins Point. So that's a foundation of our project, is create these stable headland points, which you'll see one right here off of Route 90, one here off to shore. You can write in the notes, I forget how many feet offshore. I think it's like 160 feet offshore, the furthest point of Jenkins Point. And then lastly, this kind of third larger bay or headland on the right. And those headlands, they're not, if you can think of a conventional jetty that you've seen, blue riprap, trapezoidal structure, down in Ocean City. The Ocean City inlet forms the same function. That's out in the ocean. This being in the coastal bay back in the days, we can build it with different materials. So our headlands, while we'll design them and engineer them so that they don't move in the 100-year storm, they stay relatively stable. We design them and build them at a far more gentle slope. So even the headlands themselves are at a 6-to-1 slope. That's more of like a beach strand slope, something you can walk up and down with cobblestones, silica gravels. So from sand all the way to a 10-inch or so river stone, basically. And those are all intermixed, intertwined into a hardened structure. Those hardened points can't move much. So we have a hardened point there, we have a hardened point there. What that does, it allows this whole bay, which is marked as, a sandy beach cove, to be stable over time without having to armor it, without having to wrap this whole thing in blue riprap. It's really nice. Now we're getting to the point of how do we create a quiescent place for the marina, for the community, but also provide habitat for these critical species that have near the coastal bays. So we're doing that, and we're by creating this stable platform, we're creating this habitat that's key. The second thing that we really tried to employ here is breadth, openness. Kevin tasked us with landscape flow, which I really like. We wanted to provide something that flowed. If you're a bird flying over top of this, if you're a plane flying over the top of this, after a year or two, when it's all vegetated, you're not going to see a project. We want to see a point, a natural sand spit, a natural point bar. And it's not really aesthetic. It's more, form follows function. And if it looks right, it is right. And that's what we really try to do here, is to design something that flowed well with the landscape that would function over time. And then lastly, at least from my perspective in the design kind of world, was to create something that could be used by the community. We've talked a lot about the Infrastructure being protected, you know, the marina over time having, you know, strength and resiliency. Habitat, you know, increasing birds and bees, you know, making sure that's a good place for them. But lastly, you all live here. My uncle lives here. You all, we need to enjoy these places. And I'm not to say that we would go out and build this and spend all this taxpayer money just for you all to go out and kayak and take walks on this. However, if we are spending taxpayer money, why don't we create a place that can be used? And create an example for the property owner down the corner that is privately owned, that does own the point, that has the option to either build a revetment or a seawall around the property or to build a project like this. That's kind of the goals for us, and that's what we look to employ here. Trying to think of what detail. Oh, so looking specifically at the drawing, you'll see this. Well, you'll see two things. One, you'll see this wiggling trail. It's outlined as a cobble spine and pathways. And two, you'll see this green line here. And the difference between those two is that the cobble spine and pathways delineated as a trail, that's a high and dry elevation 4. So right now, the highest elevation on that Jenkins point is around 2. So that whole area, you know, 40 feet to the right and left of this wiggling trail is high and dry elevation 4 as drawn. So that big storm we had, what, a month ago now, 2 or 3 weeks ago now, you could walk out there in your flip flops and still be dry. And this, you know, in a storm like that, it's going to slash on you, so you're not going to be all too comfortable, but it's not going to be totally submerged, which is important when we're talking about resiliency to larger storm events. And then the green line, so that's install. It's actually our haul road to get out there. It's part of the construction technique where our construction activity is high and dry. It's tracked in with heavy equipment every day that we're there. Tracks and compacts everything into place, the spine of the system. And then we feather and naturalize everything on our way out. The green line is a stable bay over time that is not built with sand. What it is it shows the kind of, because remember, as I mentioned, kind of quote unquote stable in parentheses, these bays, while they're drawn like this, they will shift in the winter time and summertime. Southeast, wintertime, north, northwest. And as they're drawn as a perfect circle or semicircle or half circle, in the summertime, it might look a little bit more like a Nike swoosh coming this way, you know, a little bit more oblong. And then in the wintertime, that sand moves a little bit to the right, but it stays stable within the two headlands. What this green line shows is we're not planning on any sand fill there, but the green line shows the stable bay over time without anything. So by putting these offshore headlands and these points, the marsh grasses that are currently there now, the erosion rate will reduce significantly. And then we have it drawn, I think this is 40 scale. 80 scale. So 80 feet roughly off of the, I mean, it's a bird's eye here, it's hard to tell, but 80 feet roughly off of the foundation of the homes is a stable embayment. So there's projected no erosion back up to the ground. So that's what that green line shows. And that's where these two headlands, the engineering behind the location of those two headlands. What else? Ask away if you guys have any questions about it. Yeah, sure.
So you're talking about public access?
Not necessarily public. I say public freely, I shouldn't say that. Community access.
So that could be like a jet ski pulls up and the people get out and stuff?
No. So it's a good question, great question. Well, yes, if that's what the community wants, but no, if that's what the community does not want. The project, while we're gaining land, property lines don't change. You know, property that is the community association is now will remain. And new property created is not public state park. A little bit of a gray line there, but it's not open to the park, public access now. So I shouldn't say public access free, sorry, I mean community access. And we deal with that commonly. Some communities are okay with it. Some communities want certain areas shut off. Some people, want other, we do signage, buoy markers, things like that.
I mean, that seems that's to preserve a healthy habitat. You have to control
Oh, for sure.
anybody coming in. I mean, that just looks like a great spot to take your boat.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is we, it comes up a lot and we build beautiful projects. It's a reality. It's going to be very inviting. It's going to be a really nice place to be. And you're in Ocean City, you're right outside Ocean City. So it does pose some hurdles, but it's not, in our opinion, in my opinion, we've dealt with those hurdles for years. It's not too alarming. There's ways around it. These folks build projects on state parks, federal parks, where they don't want certain people around at all, because we're really trying to get terrapin nesting established in the spot. And that's signage and things like that. Sorry.
So, once this is completed, who will own that property per se?
Yeah.
Is it the state of Maryland, or is it Ocean Pines, or?
So we have to look back at the property. I know the community owns the point now. Community association. Have to look back and see where your property lines were when you guys purchased the property. Just your normal survey property lines, and that is yours still. So I'm assuming, how long has the community been around? We now
68 or so.
Yeah.
It was purchased.
And that was 61 that you showed that map, Kevin? Yeah, so most of it, you own open water right now. That your property line hasn't moved. It's just open water. So you're reclaiming that land as yours. It will be yours. Now the added land, you won't, your property line won't grow. That's the fuzzy area. State of Maryland still doesn't have an answer to that.
But they've never taken land
Yeah,
and said, now this is public land that was created adjacent to a private parcel.
right.
So that's never happened. And I can't imagine it would happen and wouldn't see it happening here.
Yeah, does that make sense? So
Yeah.
we do a lot of these projects, we're going to channel work off of property lines. And that doesn't turn into a state-owned piece of property. It kind of just becomes, it's like I said, it's a gray line right now.
Got it.
But what we will know is that you're all said and done, when the project's constructed, you go out there and resurvey your boundary. You'll be able to put pins and nails in spots that you couldn't before. Right now, it's 6 feet underwater. Gotcha.
I was here at the last meeting. As a matter of fact, at the last meeting, it was highly promoted that that area would be a very nice recreational area for people to take their boats in and walk around. And now we're kind of hearing a little bit different, but that aside, I have two concerns about the project. And by the way, this is just a great idea, no question about it. I was at the meeting when that marina, Pines Point Marina, was public hearing for that marina, and the issue of wave action and the location of that marina with northeast winds was brought up and seriously discussed. And of course, the developer said there's no problem with northeast winds on that marina. Well, obviously that was not the case. But two problems I'd say, or I'm concerned about. One is the condo area, and I brought this up last time, and I know in your mind, you have these points that are protecting, but I spent a lot of time on the water. And when that northeast wind comes in there are high waves that go back into the canals, and see boats going up and down 3 and 4 feet back in canals. So that area right there, which is a direct hit, the only thing is protected and breaking up a little bit is the bridge. I'm concerned about that because those places are extremely vulnerable. If nothing is done. The other thing I'm concerned about is the money. Do we have any commitment? I asked, no one ever mentions the money. I asked last time about the money at the end of the meeting, and it was like taboo. And somebody said, might have been you, $8 million. Now, do we have the money or we hope to get the money? Is the state promised this money? Where do we stand with the money?
Sure. So first, your first comment about access. I say it lightly because the access thing is really from you all. I can't, I mean, unless you guys were like, hey, Chris, here's the keys, tell us how to utilize our point. I can't tell you how to use your property. Now, for me, we build these things, and I should stop, I say it all the time. I say public access all the time. I gotta stop saying that. We work on state land a lot. It's access whoever is permissible to the property. So 100%, it's gonna be accessible. It's gonna be 1,000 times more accessible than it is now. And diversity of enjoyment, I'd say, with regards to high water, low water, stable footing, access to the water through safe spaces, all still there. Nothing's changed. That's the principle of our work, but who it's open to is up to you all. So that hasn't changed. That was the first thing. Money was the second thing. What was the second first thing? Oh, the condo. Yeah. So with regards to you're right. I mean, common sense, I would say. Everybody in the room doesn't, and I'm not an engineer. I don't plan to ever be one. We have a lot of, our stuff is engineered at the end of the day. We use a lot of engineering parameters. However, there's also a lot of common sense in this stuff. But what we do is kind of flips common sense on its head, where we're saying we're actually not going to physically protect the areas that need to be protected. We're going to leave those open to the wind, right? Where conventional thinking is we'll put the rock there. That's where the issue is. Let's armor that. But we know more than that. There's ecosystems around. There are landscapes around that we can study, that we have studied, that showed if we strategically place these protection areas, these hard kind of areas, and here they don't have to be so hard. They can be reinforced marsh, which is what we're proposing here. If you have those stable spaces, you have a stable bay. So then you can enjoy the openness of where you live, where you all live, and not have to feel so enclosed by armoring. And that's what we proposed here. Yeah, the winds come like the Dickens, they are onshore. The erosion problem isn't the head-on wind. That's not where you get erosion from. The second that wind is a little bit more north and it's more side to the condos, that's where the erosion starts. And that's why these headlands are there, is they bend waves to make all the waves come in right onshore. Kevin's point about sea level rise, this doesn't do anything for flooding. So if you have a high storm, an elevation 4 storm with wave action, the splashing is still going to happen where it happens. But the erosiveness is gone now because of the headlands. Okay, the waves are going to be bending in ways that are engineered, but also found in nature, that keep the homes and the infrastructure non-erosive. But we're not doing it. I mean, one thing that we do, just to be fully transparent, we have talked about the idea of building up dunal features that keep water off. That gets you up to elevation 6 or 7. We just did it in Oxford to keep it off of a public road. But that lends itself to price. And that's your third point of balancing price. When we sit down and we draw these things, I mentioned constructability. We know we can construct it, but we also make sure we can fund it. We're not a design firm. We're design build. And that means a lot, because when we work on these projects, we can't finish. We can't keep our lights on until it's built. So it doesn't make sense for us to design something that's going to sit on the shelf and never be built. So we really want to design this thing and get this thing as tight as we can to make it fundable. Right now, it's even more than 8. We're around the $10 million range. However, we balance that with the benefit of the project, and we leverage that off of the funding sources, and we're right in the pocket of a fundable project. And that's not, that can be 100% state or federal funded, is what we're looking at. If, you know, you guys don't have any
You
resources.
still haven't addressed the money. You've said how much it would cost, $10 million. What do you expect? Have you applied for any funds or what?
For this project? Yeah, we, well, Coast Base can go into it. They do the applications. We are in process right now. We do not have any construction funds in hand now.
So, just to add on to that, we applied for monies for this project through DNR's, it's called Restoration to Resiliency Program. And that program was set up to fund design, and then you're in the queue to get funded for construction, right? So we were approved and funded for design, which is what's paying for this right now. But we also know that, you know, $10 million is a big chunk of change. And we look at other sources of funding as well. We have a application in right now, proposal into to NOAA, National Oceanic and Aeronautic Agency, for funding for this project. So we've already begun the process of putting proposals in to these funding agencies and for this project. Now, whether we'll get it, I don't know, but this is what, you know, we do. We work with these granting agencies to get funds for projects like this. So we don't think this is, we think this is a fundable project through those granting agencies.
Just the state alone puts out about 50 million a year for stuff like this.
But here's the thing, if you don't have design, right? And then secondly, getting permits. If you have your design and your permits, it puts you in a position of getting funded. Without having any of those things, you don't have a very strong position. Get your design, get your permits, go in for funding, and then you're in a better position to get funded.
Question?
Yeah, Kevin, at the last meeting, looking back at my previous article, I think it said December 2024, the work might actually start. That sounds like it's dependent on getting some more of this funding. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, this project, in fact, we were just talking about it just prior to the meeting today. We're really looking at, in best case scenario, December 2025 for construction, because the permitting process is going to be 18 months. Pretty sure we can count on that. And we're still going through design. So if we can get our permits submitted the next 2-3 months, then
I
hopefully
mean,
we'll be in that
what
position.
the state and federal permit process will say 6 months. But the fact is that it just takes longer. And we, you know, Kevin knows me. You guys don't know me that well yet, but I am the most, we could build that thing right now. But when we're talking about projects like these that are, you know, large sums of state and federal funds, community groups like yours, I mean, the biggest thing for me is to get you all approving this project. That's the fact. The more and more of these I do, the more important I realize these meetings are. Because the last thing I want to do is come back, whether it's 2024 or 2025, and build it. And there's always going to be somebody that's not totally happy. But people be like, I didn't want this. We didn't want this. You know, that's not what I'm into. There's enough of these projects around. We need to make sure the community is on board. And that just takes a little bit of time. Like what you're seeing right now, this rendering, that's not, it didn't help us get funding. It's not helping us get a permit. It's helping you all visualize and see and believe in this thing, because that's the most important thing. We'll get through the permit, we'll get funding. We got to make sure you all are happy with it and feel comfortable with moving forward. That's at least our goal right now.
And if there's not, I'm sorry, was just someone else. Was there, if it's not fully funded, I mean, when's this work start, or what point do we turn around and say,
Yeah.
oh, you know, for sure?
Yeah. Honestly, I haven't had a project that hasn't been fully funded. Typically, the projects that we work on, if they get traction, they get funded. It's the hard work of these folks to leverage different pots. So you might get 50% from the state in one chunk. And you gotta go to the feds and go for 25 and go to locals and what have you.
There's somewhere along the point, it's kind of like, we're good.
Yeah.
Or this is a definite maybe.
Yeah, and there are point, what we haven't talked about here is really the details of elevation and resiliency. We're building this thing to elevation 4. Again, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but if you build it at elevation 3 and it's a huge landmass like this, that's a lot of dump trucks and sand that don't have to come in. So it gets our price down. So if we get 75% of the funding and everybody locks their doors and says, look, that's it, then we can say, okay, we got X, we can build this thing to elevation 3. And then maybe plan for elevation 4 in the future if we need.
Chris, am I recalling right that on the resiliency part of this thing, the engineering of those headlands, it should continue to grow?
Yeah, that's the goal. Now I wouldn't say totally anecdotal because there's a lot of marsh migration science out there, but these are man-made marshes and in a wave environment. But the goal is to build these things so vegetation can grow and build organics. And when you got vegetation growing and sustaining itself and building organics, it's only growing vertical. So that's the goal. And we see it, we see it in projects that Kevin built when I was this big. They are still around and sea level rise is higher than it was when he built it. So they are growing vertically. And what we do know is that if you build it out of blue rock, it won't. That stuff does a lot of good stuff, but doesn't grow vertically.
And capturing sand,
Yeah,
the opportunity to capture sand.
right.
Now, you said that one larger bay area to the left.
With the green line.
Yeah, it's gonna be more hardscape. Will that area also grow because it's a bay full type of area?
Miscommunicated that green line, that's actually the opposite of hardscape. It's nothing. So it is what it is now. Marsh, 100% marsh.
And so that will grow too because of the shape of the
Yeah,
hole?
so if you see that the red dotted line, that's a shoreline as it is today. And if you see the green line, it's what we call accretion, it's what we expect the shoreline to be and accrete and grow. Now, as you can see in some spots, the green line is actually further back into the marsh, so we can plan for some plan erosion in a light sense. But then there's also accretion right out in front of the homes. Which is important. So especially being where we are in the coastal bay with a lot of sand moving, the opportunity to grab sand is real. We have some projects that don't accrete. I mean, they accrete very slowly, like an inch over a few years. We have some projects that have accreted 24 inches in 2 years. Just measured with the meter stick. Put a meter stick in the ground. When we finished the last day, we came back after a year, 18 inches. Came back after 2 years, 24 total. Because there's a lot of sand in the system. And now you have stable headlands that attract and retain that sand. But you can't really guarantee that. It's more of an environmental. We can project it, but not.
So, how will the better of the water or the dredging or depth of the water, let's say, how is that going to change or will it in and around that area?
In and around where the islands are now, or where the marine is?
In and around where the islands are now, so I'm looking at those coves and stuff, and I'm thinking of it from a boating and let's say fishing perspective.
Yeah, yep. So let's start here in this corner. This doesn't change much. There's kind of a forested point there now.
Mhm.
There's a low profile marsh there that's pretty well inundated, low marsh. You can see with the red dots. We're enhancing that area. So we're not going too much further channelward. We're actually growing more vertical in that space and adding sands and gravels to it. So it stays secure over time. So fishing and boating, nothing there. As we come around to this bay here, you can see the red line jags, and then it kind of comes into where the pine trees are now. That area will get filled in. Right now it's open water, maybe 2-3 feet deep. 2 feet max, kind of in through here on this side, and then it's about 6 feet deep in between the islands. Those areas are proposed to be filled in. All the way from 6 feet deep to about 4 feet above mean low water.
Yeah, so my question is more specifically, what is the inside of those bays look like? Are they
Oh.
4 feet? Are they gonna be?
Chris, you want to show the
Yeah,
slides?
Yeah,
from-
click, Steve, click to,
I don't want you to get ahead of yourself.
no, it's okay, it's perfect time, we brought some pictures to show. Now this is all these things are projects of scale, so it's hard to, not that we've never built anything like Jenkins, we built projects bigger than Jenkins, but I didn't show it because they didn't really relate to Jenkins.
Keep going, Steve.
Click one more. One more. There you go, yeah. Click one more, I'm sorry. Yeah. This is right around the corner. So if you're going over the beach to Assateague, Verrazano Bridge, go into that big parking lot on the left. This is the state park we did with the coastal bays. This is what you can expect for those bays. Those big sweeping kind of half circles. It's open beach strand. That area will most likely remain open beach strand because of the wave. Big waves where you all are. So that intertidal area will stay beach. And then these are the vegetated headlands. Those are those hard points that I talked about. They ultimately get vegetated up to alterniflora and beach grass, like doodle grasses, like in Ocean City, and all the way down to alterniflora, low marsh. So fishable, swimmable, kayakable for sure.
So I'm gonna be a little more specific, and I'm sorry if I'm not communicating well. How deep will the water be out there? Are you guys gonna be dredging?
No, we're not
Is it
dredging.
something- So it's still gonna be 2 feet? 3
Yeah.
feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
it depends on where, because it's gonna be 2-3 feet deep, where it's 2-3 feet deep. Where it's 6 feet deep, it's gonna be plus 4 feet elevation.
Mhm.
It's gonna be,
There are some variances over there now.
Yeah.
It's really familiar with it. And I think my point where I'm trying to get to is that, as we say, there's a beach there. And there's a potential of boats coming in.
yeah.
Is, right now, it's about 2 feet in some of those areas.
Mhm.
And is it going to be some leveling or some work on the batcher itself, like what we do, bench spoils or whatever the case is?
Yeah, no, it won't be, go back to the drawing real quick, Steve, I can point to.
It's going to be straight down, or is it gonna be tapered?
Yeah.
It's gonna be straight down, or is it gonna be tapered?
So it's on beach string, so, and he's going back, if he can, it's gonna taper down. However, I'm gonna show you where it's 6 feet deep, because it's so deep, we can't taper down forever, because it doesn't get that much more shallower the further deeper you go. We have an underwater sill proposed, which would be somewhat vertical, like a 2-to-1 slope. Down at like elevations -4 or 5, that then gets us up to a beach strand.
And roughly the deepest point is around 6 feet
Yeah,
in that area.
yeah, in between the islands is kind of the deepest spot, at least where we're working.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right in through here, this area is where a lot of that funding is going. This area and this area. It's the deepest area and it's the area that we're proposing to gain the most elevation. Because that's your point. That's what's ultimately protecting this. But I think to answer your question, right now, if it's 2 feet deep in here now, kind of where I'm circling, because remember, it's open water here up into the red line, it's gonna change to 2 feet above sea level. And then right around this line where I'm showing you is tapers down at a 8-to-1 slope. In through here is 6 feet deep. It will be not operable by boat. It'll be all, it'll be a point bar now, up to elevation 4, high and dry. And then I think we had that proposed at 40 feet, elevation 4, 10-to-1 from there. It's about 100 feet wide from waterline to waterline on those points that you could boat up to. Wish I had a whiteboard I could draw on. Well, if you have more questions now, we can provide detailed drawing. When it's in shallow water, that sand goes all the way down to the river bottom, to bay bottom. When it's in deeper water, we go at a 6-to-1 or an 8-to-1 slope down to elevation -3 or so, and then we build like, it's not a submerged wall because it's cobble still, but it's more of a vertical. Because if we were to take sand all the way out, it would be a $30 million project. So
You're not making it any deeper or anything.
no, we're not making any.
It's gonna stay where it is.
Water depth.
Bottom.
The water depth stays the water depth unless, other than in between these beach strands. A lot more shallow in there.
Josh, go ahead. He's got 2 questions online.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
The first question is, has it been determined where the material that eroded away at Jenkins Point has been deposited?
Probably in Trimper Avenue, my parents' canal.
Well, there you go. The second is the proposal to have this built from the land or the water? Osprey Point is a gated community. How will construction vehicles gain access to the area if it's built from the land?
Good question. I'm proposing hard right now to access by land. And this, again, remember I talked to you all about you all needing to support this project. Obviously goes right through your front yards and backyards. The reason why is for 2 reasons. One is cost. We've talked a lot about cost, and you might think, we're here just trying to make it more and more expensive. But the fact is we're not. And accessing by water is far more expensive than accessing by land. It's just not as conventional. So most people will access by water and say it's the only way to do it. We're completely upside down and backwards. We propose land. And the reasoning is, if we can come in and we call it the spine, but it's basically like the core of the project, the compacted high and dry dune through the middle of this point. That's our highway. That's where every street dump truck goes. That's where all of our tracked equipment goes every day for 45 days, tracking over top of it. And it makes these layers that mimic geological layers found in nature of sands and gravels in compact form. And when we install it once. It comes right from the quarry, from Rains off of 50 or wherever we get the material from. It goes onto a dump truck and it backs into the design location that's dropped and handled once. So at the end of the day, if we do access by land, a street dump truck that you'll pass, on Route 50 will be out here on the point.
How are you gonna get it there?
So we have 2 options for construction. One is to come off of this point here and to wrap around in the front and drive all the way out. The other option is to come between the pond and the homes here and drive this way. We go this way, we have to move that material twice, because the intent is not for it to stay where that green line is. It's kind of hard to think about because right now that area is vulnerable. During larger storm events, the water comes up, it gets swampy and wet. But remember, that's the opposite of what we're proposing here. We're proposing resiliency. So at the end of the day, if I can kind of put anything in your brain of like what this thing would be like if you wanted to move forward, is stability out there. Right now, we just spent some time on right here the other day, getting some survey benchmarks. Right now, you're walking in there, it's kind of light underfoot, even though you're high and dry and there's trees, it's still kind of swampy and wet. If we were to access this way, it would be high and dry, stable underfoot, even during storm events. It could be a nor'easter, you can stand there and you'll be poured down rain. But watching the waves come in and dance on the beach instead of watching from your window type deal. Or we can access by water. And it's a lot more expensive and a lot longer time frame. One of the reasons why we're proposing to work in the winter time is, if we can have less folks here when we're doing it, and if we can access by land, it's a 30 to 45 day venture. By water, it's 6 months.
It's a price difference.
We don't have it exactly costed out, but for us, significant. Millions different.
Double.
No. Not double. So I think he was up first, I thought.
Could you possibly access from the Route 90s, right? The Route 90 around that point?
Yeah, we're definitely gonna access, well, if this all goes the way it's designed, we're proposing to access from 90 for this headland.
Okay.
However, all of this marsh strand that's here now, we're proposing not to impact. And it's a good access. It's just the beach strand, that green line, remember, that's not proposed beach strand, that's leaving the marsh as is. So we'd be putting sand where we don't need it long term, instead of putting it where it's gonna stay forever.
I'll talk to you after this. I'm with Yak Access.
Okay.
So we have some things we can talk about. Cool.
So I just want to make sure, so the other access which you were talking about going to Osprey Point through there.
Yeah.
So that's a separate homeowners association.
Mm-hmm.
We have the road that goes up to that gate,
Mm-hmm.
but you're talking about, so first of all, you would need, I believe, I'm not the only one, you would need approval from them also, not just OPA.
Mhm.
Probably know all this. The other thing is, how many days? So you'd be going through there for 45 days with dump trucks?
Mhm.
So they'd have to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. And probably not 45 days total with dump trucks. But max, 45 days. Yeah, that's something we'd have to, go through and. I don't know, it's just one of those things to discuss. I'll say that, I do a lot of these meetings and access is always like one of the things to talk asphalt, and it's always more efficient, more effective, and people are happier when you do it by land. Because we can be out of your hair and gone.
Right.
Rather than drag something on for not even twice as long, more than that.
Right, in 45 days, obviously, well, I hope it's not during the summer months, right?
No.
Do you have it all planned? Do you have a plan
Yeah.
for when?
Yeah, we want to plan in the winter. He said 2025. I'm still hoping for this.
December 25?
Yeah, but we have this scheduled for the winter time. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be Christmas. It can be now.
How many truckloads do you estimate over those 45 days?
KB can answer. I don't know, keep guard, but a lot. I mean, thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, over 1,000. We do.
1,000 truckloads? or-
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna quote me on that, but yeah, I think. But if you think.
Reporter, she's gonna quote you.
Yeah, I know. Kevin, my name's Kevin Smith. I didn't. But we'll do, 100 load day, 100 load day is an easy day. Install. So if it's 1,000, we're 10 days, and stuff's in. Yeah. Now, then we're here with machines working and stuff, but we're out on the marsh at that point. Yep.
Has anybody looked at the deeds of these properties to find out that the possibility that that condo association owns that property? And not OPA?
I can confirm, but we looked at property lines and it was okay.
We looked at the data from the state tax assessment, and they indicate that that property is owned by Ocean Pines Association.
Not a question for you, and maybe not even a question for this time, but what are the discussions that are going on about public access? Now, you talked about physical access.
Yeah.
Earlier. When I talk about public access, people who are not part of that right now, that community's gated off and you can't even go back there if you wanted to. I think discussions about making it public access for the Ocean Pines community.
Good luck.
He said it wasn't a question for me. I would,
Sorry, I asked an easy question.
yeah. I don't have an answer for it, but I mean, for some reason you want my Chris Decraft answer, I would say, yeah, open it up. I mean, the goal is to provide, at least for us.
So answer it for us, Chris.
So I answer it. The goal for us in designing a project is to build a place that people enjoy. And when people enjoy it, they respect it typically. And that's a fine line, but typically people will enjoy it enough to respect it, and that's our goal. And the more people you can allow to enjoy these spaces, the more they'll be respected and kind of thought after. So yeah, if anybody wants our opinion, it should be open. The folks that live here and are involved.
Anybody else want to answer?
Steve, can you go ahead a couple of slides? I just want to show one thing. It's that same one you were showing at Assateague. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. One more. So just look at the footprints. People enjoy that site. There's a lot of traffic out there. Now that's on state park property, so bit of a difference there.
With a big
but,
parking lot.
Yeah. So,
But they have trash cans and porta potties and all that, you think?
oh, yes, yeah. No, it's state park and they, manage it and look after it and do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to show that people utilize that. You can see with all the footprints, people like it.
Sorry, just saw a comment. Sorry for the joking answer. I was just joking. It wasn't a part of our plan to look at where the islands. It was just not a part of our scope.
Is there any more questions online? Did we get all those?
Yeah, I'll throw out another question. So this is probably more for coastal bay. So we're talking about doing habitat restoration for, horseshoe crabs and the terrapins and birds and blue-footed booby or whatever we're gonna put out there. Is there any thought of habitat restoration for the sea life in there? So I'm thinking, like Monty Hawkins, and we put out all of our reefs off of Ocean City. Reefs or fishing structures or the place for the fish to live as well. And what does that look like?
Well, there are no plans at this point in time to really go into any deeper water to do anything. We're really staying within, I'll say, this footprint from the islands and really basing that design on what the old peninsula looked like. So if you look at the old peninsula and kind of this, there's a lot of similarities there. Because we know we can get permits in order to do that. We have enough issues getting permits to restore land that was once there. To go out even further requires additional permits and additional funding to do it. We're not against it, but we're not proposing it as part of this project.
What about oyster habitats? Yeah, what I'll add to that is, while it's not like, you look like our need and purpose when we submit to the Army Corps, it won't be that. But if you look at studies, and we can share them with you, 2 or 3 of them on, some of them are projects, others just living shoreline in general. Especially when we're working in water that gets down to elevation 4, 5, 6, the underwater substrate, it's just the material that we're using becomes rougher material that the fishery, shellfish and finfish, the biodiversity increases. So it's certainly a goal to create an ecosystem that supports more fish. But to Kevin's point, we're not putting out like oyster castles or things like that. However, at Assateague, the project you're looking at, the oysters blew up on the heavens. In other projects we've done, the finfish have, skyrocketed even more than adjacent natural shorelines, just because of the diversity of now the bays and the rock substrate. So it's a mutual benefit of the project.
Have you guys done projects where you put in oyster beds and oyster supporting structures?
Yeah.
In that area?
We don't do the oyster, the man-made oyster reefs. However, part of our design of why we built our headlands the way that we built them, like we had, and I can show you the detail of the slope and the material we used, is to support shellfish. If we can, so we can get mussels and oysters growing on them. So it's a yes and no answer. We don't do it deliberately through like a gadget or gizmo, like a thing. But in the way that we design and ultimately build and the materials that we use, we want that thing covered in oyster. I saw another question pop up on.
Josh, was there one more question?
Yeah, the Joe Jankowski asked, is there any possibility that the new material will end up in the same place as the eroded material?
I should say no, because I'm very confident in this project. So no, but the fact is, I mean, anything I guess could happen, but these systems, they're designed to be, we call it dynamic equilibrium. So they move a lot, but they don't really move at all over time. They wiggle a lot within their bays, but if you're looking at them over time, they're pretty damn stagnant in place. And one of the reasons for that is that the slopes that they're built at, the orientation of the bays, and the elevations, or in I said the slope, the elevation, the slope, and the orientation. So when those big storm events come that typically move material like that, they go underwater. Or the part like the elevation 4 that's above water, it's not a vertical, it's a nice gentle slope. So the waves are breaking offshore more like a reef, an offshore reef, than it is in a normal, well, in a marsh situation that we have now. So to answer your question, we design it and build it in a way that it doesn't move in those big storm events. Catastrophe, not in a big way.
We did a project in in Eastern Bay in 2002, and in 2003 Isabel hit, and this was when we were first trying out some of these techniques, and you know, we were very worried because that was a big storm, particularly there in the mid Bay. And we had some movement in the project itself, but everything pretty much stayed where it was. The project was pretty much intact. We were pretty surprised. And it really goes to what Chris was saying, which is the storm elevation, you know, that was +8 there, you know, really goes over top of the project. And the project's built not to fight those kinds of energies, but to work with those kinds of energies, because the slopes are very gradual. So we've seen these things. I mean, we've been doing it for a while now, and they've survived some pretty good storms. Not that you couldn't have a storm that could do something. Believe me, anything can happen. But you know, they're as long as they're designed and built correctly, they can be pretty resilient.
Did you guys talk about total construction time?
You say total construction?
Yeah.
So go ahead, Cindy. We'll answer that one after your.
I was just wondering from Kim, what kind of shorebirds do you think are going to be attracted to this new land base?
Well, it depends on use. For one, like if you left it alone, a lot of birds, oyster catchers that's one bird that we have. Black skimmers possibly as well. We've lost habitat in the coastal bays completely. There are no nesting black skimmers. They're an endangered species in Maryland, state listed, and we have not had a breeding pair of black skimmers. You see them, that's a really long black and white bird with the mandible that skims along the water. So we see them, and we see them post-breeding from other states, but we have none nesting here. That would be a great habitat for that. Also migratory birds like dunlin and a lot of little tiny peeps. We call them peeps. They're little tiny birds that use that kind of landscape in order to feed, especially because some of that area is shallow. And so they really like to wade out in that. So I can see lots of different possibilities, but again, it sort of depends on breeding season and how much access there is to people and so on and so forth. So, but back where that green line is, because that wouldn't be where people would be. That could possibly be an area with that marsh that something like a species like an oyster catcher could really build a nest and be quite safe there. So, from my point of view, it's a pretty exciting project as far as possibilities.
So the other question was about total time.
Yeah.
And I know, Chris, you were talking about 45 days to get in and do the heavy construction.
Yeah.
Get the materials in, move it around. And then typically, if you were to build something like this in December, you would probably wait 4 months or so until April and May and let things settle in and then plant it at that time of the year. And then, you may want to watch it a little bit after that through the summer, because, on something like this, there may be some tweaks that you may want to make at some point in time and do a little adaptive management. But I think, generally we're talking about the major part of the construction through the planting, which would be total about a 6-month period of time. But not all construction going on at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, we come in, we rip the Band-Aid off, that takes 45 days. That's something that like you really notice the change. You'll just know, it's like boof, that's built. And then we will work here for, 2 years sometimes on things that you won't notice the changes. And it's sorry, I just want to be transparent. I mean, we do that. I say that kind of in a good way. We hold ourselves to a really high level of accountability. We want these things to be perfect. So we're talking about 2 guys with some extra planes a year later, or, rakes and shovels and some things. It's not, but we don't just take our check and run away, I guess we could all say. We are here to help landscape and garden the project.
If I could offer a suggestion, somebody needs to talk to that association where those homes are, and they're that close community. Without them, you're not getting anywhere on the land. And I don't know, is there anybody here tonight from that housing development?
Yeah. Or King Fishing Creek.
What would your community like to think about 45 days or 2 years?
In the winter, I would say go for it.
Most
Yeah,
of
we've
the
got-
residents aren't there.
Yeah, we've spoken with a few residents, just in passing, we've gotten the same answer. But we'll obviously have to get it formalized.
It wouldn't take long to get approval. It would require a board meeting.
We have been in touch with PJ.
Right.
She's been involved in a lot of these conversations over time, who is a resident there. And I believe she's also informing other residents, what the status is and things like that. So they're aware. I hope you're aware. I'm pretty sure you're aware.
It's here.
It is along the details.
Right.
Learn something tonight.
Do you have any other questions?
Not really.
We've got one more online from Joe Jankowski. He asked, does the canal to the yacht club get dredged on a regular basis? Could this project impact that?
Does it get dredged on an annual basis?
No.
With regards to this project impacting that, again, I want to say a lot of people don't answer, but I'll say no, it won't impact it. If anything, it helps retain materials, littoral drift on the project instead of in the canal. Now, canals are man-made things and they can do weird things, but we build projects like these right adjacent to canals and inlets and dredged areas, not on purpose, but as a mutual benefit, and they've been successful in keeping the areas more open over time. It doesn't always, completely offset the need to dredge, but it can help. We know that the material that's going to show the sand here is not going to end up in the canal. We know that. It's just whether or not the material moving naturally fills in that channel.
There's no dredging associated with this or taking spoils from another area and bringing it back to that.
We would love to bring spoils from another area. It's a good comment, and it's something that we would love to do. It's unfortunately a bear to get through permit and organization. Another reason why the price is what the price is because we only use clean material. We're not bringing in anything that has silts or anything in. We're bringing coarse. They call it concrete sand. So what's used to make concrete. Coarse beach sand is what we use. But you can find that across the coastal bays and dredging operations, just whether or not we can get it permitted and organized to use it. But that's what these guys are working on. We're working on with them to And it also lends itself to a dredge disposal area. I don't want to open up a big can of worms, but it is what it is. We're talking about building this baby to elevation 4, if you don't have enough money, to elevation 2. But you could open yourself up to a location for the Army Corps to dredge, to spoil clean sand. Because if your headlands are at the right elevation, you can fill the cup up more and more over time. It's a good disposal area. We've been proposing that for projects. It disrupts your use a little bit. If you use it for 4 or 5 years and you love it, and the Army Corps calls and says, I got 1,000 loads of sand, can I dump it on your beach? But it's an option. Right now, there aren't many of those. Poplar Island over in Mid Bay. But
Yeah, we'd love to get sand from the inlet. If the Corps of Engineers wants to give it to us, we'll take it. It's beautiful stuff coming out of there.
good. Thank you for your time, and I don't know if you have my phone number, but we have their phone number, and I don't know how many more times we're doing it. But honestly, I can't tell you. I don't know if it's just because recently I've had an epiphany. It's like we can't move forward with these projects without. I'm not gonna say everybody in the room, but like we want everybody in support of this project because they're not easy projects, and we got a lot more to do, and we just want to make sure that you all are comfortable with it. That's important.
Okay, I'm just going to talk about next steps very quickly, which is, so if you have any comments, please make them known. Hopefully within, a reasonable time frame here. Next couple of days will be good, next week or so. We'd like to hear them because as we move forward, what we're going to be doing is asking these guys to further develop the design to get it to a stage where we're ready to submit permits. When we're at that stage where we're ready to submit permits, we're going to need the approvals from Ocean Pines Association, as well as Osprey Point. Make sure everybody's on board so that we can submit those permit applications, which we hope to do within a couple of months. So, John, did you want to say anything else, or are we good? Or
We're good.
Anything we can do, Josh, or anything, any type of communications you want us to put out or summaries or whatever, we'll be glad to help.
Okay, yeah, we'll be doing that. So thank you all for coming. Oh, sorry.
Do you have an email that you would want people to send comments to?
Yeah, ksmith@mdcoastalbays.org. So it's ksmith@mdcoastalbays.org. Thanks all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.